Welcome to the quiet garden of your soul. If you are listening to this at the end of a long day, perhaps there is also some weariness within you. Weariness from hurtful words, from glances that shake your confidence. Weariness from not understanding why living kindly can still lead to being hurt. Or maybe it is simply that you are looking for a place to breathe, to let go, to remember that your mind has always had the potential to be as calm as a still lake. In this world, where everything is in constant flux, where emotions rise and fall like waves, where words can cut like knives and judgment hides in every look, how can we hold on to inner peace? How can we avoid being swept away by anger, jealousy, or pain? Tonight, you and I will take a gentle yet profound journey, where ancient Zen principles will be told through simple, heartfelt stories, not for you to memorize, but to feel, to let each word fall like raindrops onto the deep soil of your consciousness. And when the light of wisdom begins to glimmer, you will come to realize, peace does not come from controlling the world out there, but from understanding the world within yourself. Lie down comfortably. Let your shoulders relax. Breathe a little slower, because from this moment on, you do not have to try so hard. All you need to do is listen, and let your mind return to its original state, quiet, deep, and unshakable. There are truths that do not need to be memorized. Just hearing them is enough for your mind to settle. There are teachings that do not wear the rigid mask of doctrine, but are like a gentle breeze brushing over the mountains, soft, yet strong enough to smooth even the most stubborn stones in the heart. The principles you are about to hear are not dry theories. They are the distilled wisdom of masters who lived fully in mindfulness, passed down quietly through thousands of years of meditation and contemplation. This is wisdom born from silence, from deeply observing the nature of suffering and peace, of love and anger, of letting go and attachment. They do not require you to understand them right away. You only need to open your heart, like a still lake ready to welcome the first rains of the season. Each teaching is a mirror, not reflecting the outside world, but illuminating what is happening within you, how you react, how you love, how you navigate through life's storms. On tonight's journey, you will be guided through 10 ancient principles, 10 doors that open into a world of unconditional peace, of quiet strength, and of a heart that knows how to be compassionate, even toward itself. You will learn how not to be hurt by words, to understand that the most difficult person may sometimes be your greatest teacher, to see how jealousy can be turned into motivation, to be firm with yourself, but gentle with others. You will come to know that true peace does not come from controlling life, but from deeply understanding yourself. Just keep listening with an open heart. If your eyes happen to close along the way, that is perfectly okay, because what needs to be planted will be planted. The seeds will quietly take root in your sleep, and one day, you will find your mind steady like a mountain in the storm of life. If you are ready, let us begin with the first principle. Words cannot hurt you. There are days when we move through life as if the sun has hidden behind gloomy clouds. Not because the sky is truly dark, but because inside us, words have just echoed that tighten the heart, a criticism, a hurtful remark, a look filled with disapproval. These seemingly invisible things somehow have the power to rob us of sleep, to stir unease, and sometimes linger for years like a scar that never heals. That is the power we unconsciously give to words. But in Zen, there is a deeper truth. Words are just passing wind. And the pain comes only when we hold onto their echo and refuse to let go. To remain unhurt is not about blocking our ears, but about opening the heart so wide that words pass through without leaving a trace. To remain unshaken is not about hiding from the wind, but about becoming like a still lake, even when struck by stones. It ripples briefly and then returns to calm. Long ago, in a small village at the foot of the Himalayas, where clay walls bore the marks of time and mountain winds, lived a young monk named Tenzin. He resided in a monastery nestled among the clouds. Each morning, he would drape his faded saffron robe over his shoulders and descend the mountain to beg for alms. Walking along stone paths worn smooth by generations, most villagers respected the monks and would bow while offering bowls of porridge, handfuls of rice, or fresh bundles of greens. But there was one man named Noru, once a wealthy merchant, now living alone in an empty shop, who waited for Tenzin every day just to insult him. "You parasite! How can you be so shameless?" he shouted. "A young man like you, refusing to work and choosing to beg, what disgrace!" His words cracked through the air like whips, making passers-by lower their eyes and children hide behind their mothers. Yet Tenzin never reacted. He did not bow his head in sadness. Nor did he argue or walk away. He simply stopped, pressed his palms together in a bow, and walked on with a serene gaze, as if nothing had happened. His response stunned the villagers. Some thought he was being submissive. Others believed he was holy. But only a little girl named Pema, just 7 years old, dared to step closer and ask, with genuine curiosity, "Master, why are you not sad? Why do you not cry? Why are you not angry?" Tenzin looked at her, his eyes warm like sunlight filtering through leaves after rain. He did not answer immediately, but led her to a pond behind the monastery. The water was so still it mirrored every leaf, every drifting cloud. He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the center of the pond. Ripples spread outward gently, then faded. The water returned to stillness, as if untouched. "Do you see?" Tenzin asked. "Other people's words are like that stone. They can cause ripples in us for a moment. But if our mind is wide and deep enough, they will fade. There is no need to push them away. No need to resist. Just do not hold onto them." Pema tilted her head, thinking, and then quietly nodded. But she still asked the question that even adults often wonder. "Then how can I make my mind like that pond? Master, why do I feel sad every time someone says something mean?" Tenzin smiled, then answered as if reciting a gentle verse. "Because you still believe people can define who you are with their words. But in truth, no one can touch your essence unless you allow it. Hurtful words only cling when we embrace them, replay them in our minds, and use them to measure our worth. If you let them pass, like wind through an open window, they cannot stay." He sat beside the pond, placing his hand on the surface, feeling the soft coolness touch his palm. "Noru is not truly angry at me," he said. "He is angry at himself, at dreams that fell apart, at wounds that never healed. I am just a convenient target. If I respond with anger, I become a place where his anger continues to live. But if I remain still, I become the place where it disappears." The story spread through the village like a gentle breeze. No one saw Tenzin as weak anymore. In him, they saw a quiet strength, the strength of someone who did not need to win with words, yet still changed the world around him. Even Noru, after many years of shouting, one day found himself face to face with the understanding gaze of a child, Pema, and could not utter a single word. That silent compassion cracked open the shell of his long-held pain. His eyes welled up with tears. And one day, he came to the monastery, not to apologize, but to learn how to make peace with himself. Tenzin did not teach anything. He simply smiled and pointed to the pond. And so, the first lesson in becoming unshakable was planted, not through lofty theories, but through a small ripple, where one person did not react. One person listened, and one person learned to forgive. Just as water can return to stillness, your mind can return to calm. The words that once hurt you may have lingered longer than you wished. But in this very moment, you can choose a new way to receive them. Not by hardening, but by softening. Not by shielding, but by opening your heart. Because the truth is, you do not need to run from the world, only to stop letting the world make you forget your own quiet essence. People often think that to remain unhurt by words, we need a heart of stone. But what Tenzin left behind says otherwise. The softer the heart, the better it listens without absorbing, the more peace it can hold. Because it is in gentleness that the mind becomes wide enough to embrace both the good and the bad without labeling them as right or wrong. One morning, as Tenzin once again walked past the old shop where Noru used to wait, something was different. There were no shouts, no insults. Noru just looked at him silently, his eyes heavy like winter clouds. Tenzin stopped, as always, and bowed, but this time, he stayed longer. They stood in stillness, saying nothing, on a stone path still damp with morning dew. Noru looked uneasy, as if realizing he had spent too much time throwing stones into a lake that never fought back. In that moment, something strange happened within him. The anger suddenly softened, then faded like smoke in the wind. A man who once roared now looked bewildered, like a child caught silently crying. Quietly, he cast one last glance at Tenzin and turned inside, leaving behind a silence, not the silence of resignation, but the stillness of a first acceptance after years of locking himself inside his own bitterness. The villagers witnessed the scene in silence. Some were moved, some were surprised, but no one said a word, because sometimes, the deepest transformations do not arrive with loud declarations, but with a wordless hush. As light as the season's first snowflake. That day, Pema ran up to the monastery, her face glowing like sunlight after rain. "Master, today Mr. Noru did not shout," she said cheerfully. "I looked at him and I was not scared anymore. Somehow, I felt he was just sad. Not mean like before." Tenzin sat down and gently placed his hand on her head. When you stop reacting to someone's anger, you give them a chance to look at themselves. Just like how a still lake does not reflect the storm, the dark clouds find nowhere to cling. That evening, as the oil lamp glowed softly through the small window of his meditation room, Tenzin wrote a simple line into the worn pages of his notebook. "It is not words that hurt us. It is how we hold onto them that causes pain." Outside, the wind still moved through the pine trees. But inside, another wind had come to rest. From that day on, Noru no longer shouted. Sometimes, he simply sat at the front of his old shop, gazing toward the monastery hidden in the clouds. as if waiting for something he had not yet named. People said he had changed. But Tenzin knew, it was not a confrontation, not a debate, not a clever response that changed him. It was the non-reaction, the quiet that did not fight back, the compassion that did not defend itself, that helped a man realize he could begin again, even if it was late. That story was never meant to glorify Tenzin. It was meant to remind us of the strength of softness. When you do not respond to hurt with more hurt, you break the cycle of suffering. When you refuse to react, you are no longer a carrier for negativity to spread. Non-reaction does not mean indifference or submission. It is a conscious choice, a knowing that the person who is angry does not need to be defeated, but needs to be seen through eyes of understanding. You may not have the power to change others right away, but even if they do not change, you yourself, become stronger each time you choose not to let your heart be pulled by hurtful words. In this world, where it is so easy to react, so easy to talk back, so easy to get swept into battles of words, the one who can keep their inner silence is the one who is truly strong. Not strong to fight others, but strong enough not to lose themselves. Words cannot hurt you, unless you allow them to become part of the story you tell yourself. Starting today, you can rewrite that story. No longer, I am someone who was insulted, but I am someone who learned to stay unmoved. Just as the surface of water returns to stillness after every stone, your mind, if vast enough, will also know how to return. Herb teaching too. Everyone is your teacher. People often think only virtuous masters can give us valuable lessons. But in the light of Zen, every person we meet, from the kindest stranger to the one who causes us the greatest suffering, reflects something imperfect in ourselves. Each person who enters our life brings a lesson. Nobody shows up in our life meaninglessly. Some come to love us. Some come to test our patience. Some come to teach us how to let go. Some come to reveal what we are still hiding inside ourselves. The question is not whether they are good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, but rather, what are we learning from their presence? In a small monastery nestled in a bamboo forest in ancient China, where leaves rustled like nature chanting sutras, lived an elderly Zen master named Lin, known not only for his wisdom but for his boundless patience. His monastery attracted practitioners from far away. Some journeyed for a month over treacherous mountain passes. Others abandoned their estates to reclaim their true hearts. Among the students who came that spring was a young man named Jian, exceedingly intelligent, gifted at reasoning, yet full of arrogance. Jian did not come to learn, but to prove he already knew. From the very first day, he attracted attention, not for his devotion, but for his showy behavior. He often entered the meditation hall late, the clacking of his wooden clogs echoing through the silence like a boastful proclamation. While everyone sat quietly in meditation, he fidgeted with cushions, adjusted his robes, and struck dramatic poses. The atmosphere of meditation was disturbed by just one person, and yet no one spoke up. During teachings, whenever Master Lin lectured on emptiness or shared an aspect of non-self, Jian always raised his hand to debate. His questions were not meant to clarify the teaching, but to show off his superiority. With elaborate quotes, sharp arguments, circuitous questions, all intended to throw others off balance, many students began to feel disheartened. Some quietly left the monastery. One day, a calm student named Wei could no longer contain himself and approached the master. Amid the rustling bamboo and the late afternoon light shimmering on the lotus pond, Wei spoke with restrained tone. "Master, I do not understand why someone like Jian is allowed to stay. He disrupts the stillness, always interrupts the teaching, and disrespects everyone. His presence makes our practice heavier. We came here seeking tranquility, but you keep the most disruptive person." Master Lin only smiled, his eyes reflecting the bamboo grove mirrored in the pond. He did not answer at once, but took Wei on a walk around the monastery. They stopped in front of an ancient pine tree, its roots spreading across the ground, its trunk bent but full of strength. "This pine has stood here for over 200 years," he said. "It has endured many storms. If it grew in a sheltered place, it may have grown straight, but storms forced it to root deeply, to bend, to survive. Strength does not come from peaceful environments, but from enduring adversity." Wei stood speechless, his heartbeat marking a moment of recognition. The master continued quietly. "Jian is the wind. Each time he frustrates you, what do you see in yourself? That is the part of your mind that is unstable. That is the patience you still lack. You could avoid someone like Jian, but does life never bring anyone like that again? Only when you face them do you truly know where your mind stands." In the days that followed, Wei began to see Jian differently. No longer as a disruptive opponent, but as a mirror. Each time irritation arose, he turned to observe his mind. Each time he felt like reacting, he breathed more deeply. One day, when Jian again arrived late for meditation, Wei remained calm, his eyes half closed, his breath steady, his mind unmoved. A subtle shift spread in the group. Other students gradually moved from judgment to silent acceptance. Strangely enough, when no one reacted, Jian began to change. One misty morning over the bamboo grove, Jian came on time. No one spoke, no judging glances, no sighs, only a silent space of acceptance. For the first time, Jian sat down and truly remained still. That afternoon, Jian approached Master Lin, his gaze softer, his voice quieter. "Master, why have you never blamed me? Never expelled me, even though I know I caused much trouble?" The Zen master looked at him and slowly replied, "Because I know you did not come here to cause trouble. You came because you were in pain. The one most skilled in reasoning is often the one afraid to be seen in his own wounds. I did not teach you with words, because you were not ready to hear. I simply let you stay long enough for you to see what you truly need." One rainy season passed. The monastery remained quiet in its bamboo forest. But hearts had transformed. Wei understood that his teacher was not only the one who sat on the teaching platform. It was also the one who disturbed him, the one who made him uncomfortable, the one who brought his unripe aspects into light. Jian also came to realize that the master did not need to teach by doctrine, only to provide space to stumble without rejection. Each person in the monastery was a lesson. Some taught through silence, some taught through shortcomings, some taught through compassion. As you walk through life, there will always be people who irritate you, hurt you, or reveal your own helplessness. But if you learn to step back, take a deep breath, and ask, "What is this person teaching me?" you will begin a path of transformation. Not because they are better, but because you have grown. Everyone is your teacher, not just the robed master. but anyone who causes your mind to tremble. Those you love teach you openness. Those you fear teach you about the limits you need to overcome. Those you dislike teach you about attachment and reaction. From today on, if someone gets under your skin, try smiling and whispering in your heart, "Thank you, unnamed teacher," because through them, you realize how far you have come, and how far you still have to go on the path to becoming a mind that stands unmoved. Sometimes we think only gentle, compassionate souls can help us evolve, but life often sends us disguised teachers, in the form of the roughest edges, the ones who make us angry, who do the opposite of what we want, who inadvertently touch the deepest wounds we once tried to hide. No one likes meeting them, but if you look deeply, you will see they are not here to break you, but to illuminate the obscured parts within. Like a mirror that only shows dust when hit by light, those difficult people are the light shining directly on the undiscovered shadows inside you. Without them, we might delude ourselves into thinking we are calm, compassionate, and tolerant enough, but in truth, only in our interactions with others does the true nature of our mind appear. The younger students began to feel frustrated. They whispered that Gun was arrogant, that he had not truly let go, that his ego was too large. One morning, as everyone was sweeping the courtyard, Gun walked out late, stood watching, and commented, "What a waste of effort. The wind will blow more leaves in anyway." His words were not meant to hurt, but they stung, carrying a sense of being looked down upon. A student named Lu, known for her patience, could not take it anymore. She went to Master Du, tearfully asking to leave the monastery. "I did not come here to argue, to be judged every day," she said. "I came to learn how to be at peace with myself. But with someone like Gun around, that peace cannot exist." Master Du did not react as she expected. Instead, he pointed toward a bamboo wind chime hanging from the eaves of the temple, gently swaying with the autumn breeze. "Do you hear that chime?" he asked. "Yes," Lu replied, still confused. "That sound does not come from the chime alone. It only rings when there is wind. Just like the wisdom within your heart, it shines brightest through friction. If you only lived in a perfect environment, where no one annoyed you, your peace would be like a bell hanging in a sealed room, forever silent." Lu fell quiet. The master's words were like drops of clear water falling onto the rippling surface of her mind. The next day, she chose to stay, but this time, she began to observe Gun with new eyes. She no longer reacted to his sarcastic remarks. She simply took a deep breath and asked herself, "What is this discomfort revealing about the parts of me that still need healing?" One day, as Gun criticized the younger students' chanting practice, Lu stepped forward, placed her hand gently on his shoulder, and said, "I used to think you were just trying to be difficult, but now I understand. Maybe you are simply searching for a place where you truly feel heard." Gun was startled. His face showed surprise, then softened, like clouds melting into the late afternoon breeze. After a long pause, he replied, "You are the first person who has not argued with me." Not long after that, Gun slowly began to change. He remained thoughtful, analytical, but instead of criticizing, he began asking questions with sincerity. During chanting sessions, he would sit quietly, eyes half closed, no longer agitated. One day, he bent down to pick up fallen yellow leaves from the old brick courtyard. a faint smile on his lips. Others noticed, but no one said anything. Still, in their hearts, respect had replaced judgment. As for Master Du, he continued to sit under the eaves, as if he had always known everything would unfold in its own time. Lu carried that lesson for the rest of her life. That the most difficult people are often the ones who push us furthest along the path of growth. That not everyone who makes us happy helps us mature. Some come not to teach with gentle words, but to expose the cracks within us, cracks that, if not revealed, will keep us fragile. Just like Gun, the one who triggered reactions, turned out to be the one who awakened in others the deeper qualities, patience, inner observation, and the wisdom to step back and see the bigger picture. From then on, whenever Lu encountered someone who unsettled her, she no longer avoided them. She listened more, not to agree, but to understand how her mind was reacting. She understood that everyone is a teacher to someone, sometimes unknowingly, sometimes unintentionally, but in the eyes of the awakened, no one is without meaning. The world will continue to send you people like Jian, like Gun, those who disturb the surface calm to lead you into deeper stillness. If you can welcome them as necessary parts of your journey, then no one can take your peace away. Because by then, you have learned to see everyone as a messenger, delivering your own lesson in an envelope labeled, another person. Beneath the calm exterior of a practitioner, there sometimes remain subtle undercurrents difficult to name. Not always anger or fear. Sometimes it is a quiet sting that comes and goes like a shadow in the light of mindfulness. Jealousy. A deeply human reaction. Very real, but also one of the most profound obstacles blocking the mind from true inner freedom. Jealousy arises when we see in others what we lack: talent, happiness, love, recognition. It makes us shrink, withdraw, measuring ourselves against someone else's light. But Zen does not ask us to deny that emotion. Instead, it invites us to look at it directly, without shame, without avoidance, to see that jealousy, when listened to, can become a compass for our deepest growth. Transforming jealousy into inspiration is not just a theory, but an inner journey, where acknowledgement becomes the gateway to freedom. In a humble monastery nestled behind the terraced fields of ancient Vaishali, two novice monks entered during the season of the full moon. One was named Dao, intelligent, disciplined, always pushing himself to memorize scriptures, meditate rigorously, and follow the monastic rules with precision. The other was Ananda, slow, quiet, often sitting still for long periods, watching falling flowers, insects crawling across the stone, or quietly helping others wash bowls and fold blankets. Dao had a habit of studying in the middle of the night, training himself with intense willpower to break through delusion. The teachers often praised his diligence. But then something strange began to happen. When someone needed help understanding a difficult scripture, they went to Ananda. When someone in the hall felt sad, they sought to sit beside Ananda, not Dao. When the senior monks gave teachings, they often looked toward Ananda, as if they saw in him a silent depth. Dao could not help but notice. At first it bothered him, and slowly it grew heavier. One evening, after chanting practice, he saw a senior monk smile and nod at Ananda. Dao quickly turned away, a warm sting rising in his chest, not from hatred, but from pain. "I have worked so hard," he thought. "Why am I always outside the light?" That night, he could not sleep. Among the sounds of insects, his heart repeated questions with no answers. Have I not done enough? Why is it never me who is seen? The next morning, Tao brought his turmoil to the abbot, an elder monk. His hair silvered with time, but his eyes bright as summer's first dawn. After a long silence, the abbot pointed to an oil lamp burning on the table and asked, "Do you see this flame?" Tao nodded. "If another lamp is lit, does this flame lose any of its light?" Tao was silent. The master continued, "You are living like a solitary flame, afraid of being dimmed by another's brightness. Instead of seeing that light can be shared without comparison. If you see someone better, brighter, more gifted, instead of shrinking from your sense of lack, you can choose to learn from them. Jealousy is simply a sign that what you long for is already nearby." Tao bowed his head very low. In that moment, it was as if the heavy fog within him had finally begun to lift. After that conversation, instead of avoiding Ananda, Tao began to sit beside him more often. One day, while they were sweeping the courtyard together, Tao asked, "How can you be so at ease? You never try to compete, never feel the need to prove yourself, and yet people naturally like you?" Ananda smiled, his gentle face like a rising crescent moon. "I do not try to make people like me," he said. "I just try to keep my mind from being disturbed. Whenever I see someone do something I have not yet mastered, I take note of it, as a sign, this is something I still need to learn." That simple response felt like a key unlocking a door within Tao. From that day on, Tao no longer competed as he once did. Whenever he saw someone excel in something, he wrote it in his notebook, not to compare, but to learn. When he met someone who spoke well, he practiced listening better. When he encountered someone with compassion, he observed how they behaved. When he saw someone with peaceful eyes, he asked himself what was unsettling his own gaze. This transformation did not take away his effort, it made his effort more peaceful. Instead of letting jealousy torment him, he turned each moment of it into motivation to look inward, to illuminate what was lacking, to nurture what still needed to grow. Years later, when both Tao and Ananda had become teachers in different monasteries, they remained in touch. In one letter to Ananda, Tao wrote, "There was a time when your light caused me pain. Now I know that light was the lantern guiding my path. Thank you, not for the things you taught, but for your presence, which helped me grow." From that point forward, whenever jealousy arose, Tao no longer felt ashamed or tried to hide it. He smiled, as someone receiving a sacred signal. "I am still on the right path. Because if my heart still trembles at another's light, it means there is still potential within me waiting to awaken." Just like seeds sprouting in sunlight, jealousy, when seen through the light of mindfulness, is truly an opportunity to move toward what we deeply long for. When you see someone else succeed, instead of asking, "Why not me?" try asking, "What quality have they cultivated that I can learn from?" When you see someone being loved, do not rush to feel sorry for yourself. Observe how they love, how they communicate, how they live. When you see someone living in peace, do not assume they are simply lucky. Quietly explore what path brought them there. Not to imitate, but to let their presence become a seed of inspiration within you. Because in the end, the world does not need more competition, it needs more light to be lit. A light that does not dim anyone else, but makes the entire garden of humanity warmer and brighter. Herb Teaching 4. Be strict with yourself. Gentle with others. Among the common mental habits of human beings, one of the most subtle traps is our tendency to do the opposite of what is needed. To be lenient with ourselves when we make mistakes, and overly harsh toward others when they stumble. This does not happen because we are bad, but because the ego is still in control. It constantly seeks to protect its self-image by lowering others. Zen, on the other hand, teaches the opposite path. Be strict with yourself, not through punishment, but with the courage to face yourself. Be gentle with others, not because they are always right, but because you understand that every person is struggling with their own form of suffering. Those who are harsh toward others are often those who have yet to face their own wounds. And those who show the most compassion are usually the ones who have walked through deep pain without letting it turn their hearts to stone. True inner discipline does not need to be displayed. It is like a strong root reaching deep into the earth, allowing the branches to stretch out and embrace even the harshest winds. In a monastery by the Ganges River, where each morning the sound of the temple bell blends with the flowing water into a hymn of awareness, lived a monk named Man, known throughout the region for his strict self-discipline. Every day, he rose before dawn and meditated for 4 hours before stepping outside. His meals were always simple, without added flavors, and he never made special requests. Disciples often looked to him as a model of diligence. But what truly earned their respect was not his austerity, but his kindness toward the small mistakes of others. When a young novice spilled a bucket of water, he did not scold him. When a junior monk overslept and missed morning meditation, he did not punish him. Someone once asked, "Master, why are you so lenient with them? If you had made the same mistake, you would have punished yourself." Man simply smiled, "Because I know where I am going, but they are still finding their path." If someone has just entered the forest and cannot yet tell healing herbs from poisonous plants, how can we blame them for stepping on a thorn? At that monastery, there was a young nun named Dieu, known for her fiery temperament and tendency to judge. She practiced diligently, reciting sutras, meditating deeply, but she often criticized others. One day, she caught a novice secretly napping in the garden after class. Instead of gently reminding him, she dragged him into the courtyard and scolded him harshly in front of everyone. The boy was terrified, bowed his head in silence, and from that day became withdrawn, afraid to speak to others. The incident was brought to Master Man. After hearing the story, he did not immediately judge. He simply invited Dieu to walk with him to the riverbank. They sat there under the golden afternoon light glimmering on the water. "Do you know the reed plant?" he asked. Dieu nodded. "Though delicate, the reed bends with strong winds. It does not break. It does not dry out. Because it does not try to stay rigid. It does not resist. A practitioner must learn this softness. Stand tall within yourself, but do not force others to match your posture." Dieu bowed her head, saying nothing. Inside her stirred a small storm, part shame, part awakening. That evening, she sought out the novice. She did not say much, simply bowed to him and poured him a cup of tea. The boy, surprised, teared up. From that day forward, their relationship softened. Dieu was no longer rigid in her strictness, but learned when to speak, when to stay silent, and how to let her gaze replace harsh words. This change spread through the monastery like the scent of incense, unnoticed by words, but felt by all. One day, when Jiu had matured and was invited to teach at another monastery, she opened her talk with a simple story. I used to think a good practitioner was someone who never made mistakes. But now I understand. A good practitioner is someone who dares to face their mistakes without excuses, and does not use their own perfection as a sharp blade against others. The hall fell silent, not from surprise, but because within each listener lived a version of Jiu, once harsh in the wrong way, once too proud too soon, once lacking compassion. Zen teaches that inner discipline is the foundation, but compassion is the doorway. If you only have discipline without compassion, you may become a prison for yourself and others. If you only have compassion without discipline, your mind may scatter like smoke. The middle path lies between these two poles, where you train yourself through mindfulness while embracing others with understanding. When you truly know how hard it is to overcome a mistake, you can no longer bring yourself to harshly blame someone still struggling. When you truly face your own ego, you no longer rush to condemn others just because they mirror a weakness you have not yet accepted. If today you see someone make a mistake, remember that you too have made your share in the past. If today you are working to better yourself, hold on to discipline, but do not let that discipline become a whip to strike others. Be strict with yourself as a gardener tending each leaf with care. Be gentle with others as the morning sun touching a tender sprout. Because in the end, it is not harshness that makes people grow. It is the union of deep roots and gentle winds. No one is born perfect. Each of us is a journey built from the uneven bricks of the past, the unhealed cracks of pain, and the detours we took in the dark. What we often forget is that we too have disappointed others, spoken unwisely, reacted poorly, taken wrong turns. But when we see the flaws in someone else, the ego rises like a commander, rushing to judge, to correct, to prove we are better. That is instinct, but it is not wisdom. In the light of Zen, the opposite is the path. Turn inward. Ask yourself, have I become clear enough? Patient enough? Do I truly understand this person before deciding to judge them? When you hold yourself to inner discipline, you no longer have time to scrutinize the faults of others. And when your heart becomes spacious, your gentleness naturally flows through every glance, every word, every silence between two people. A legend from an old temple in Kyoto tells of an elder master named Kenji, known for his piercing gaze, said to see right through a person's soul. Visitors often saw him sitting silently by the porch, motionless, hands lightly folded, eyes resting on the rock garden. To those unfamiliar, he seemed intimidating. To those who knew him, he was deeply revered. Under Kenji's guidance, the monastery had no written rules, yet every monk knew how to carry themselves. One autumn day, a new novice named Riku arrived, a kind-hearted boy, but careless, often distracted, forgetful, and prone to small mistakes. During his very first meal, Riku spilled soy sauce on the tatami mat that the senior monks had cleaned carefully that morning. No one said a word, no scolding, but every eye turned to him, not angry, just filled with quiet disappointment. That evening, as Riku went to collect bowls, his hands trembled. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I did not mean to." Master Kenji looked up briefly and said softly, Tomorrow, wake earlier than everyone else and sweep the entire meditation hall. Not as punishment, but so your heart will remember, every careless act leaves a trace for someone else. The next morning, Riku woke before dawn, with a broom in hand. He stepped across the cold stone steps, sweeping each corner, wiping every crevice. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the paper doors and landed on his shoulders, he felt something unfamiliar rise within, not shame, but a sense of responsibility. He understood that the strictness he had received did not come from anger, but from a belief that he could be better. From that day on, Riku began to change. He no longer left his things scattered, no longer laughed during chanting, no longer slacked off during communal duties. But what moved people most happened one quiet afternoon, when a younger novice, folding his robes for the first time, made a complete mess. Riku saw it, and did not scold, did not frown. He simply sat down, carefully folded each layer of cloth, and smiled as he said, "Everyone starts like this. Back then, I even folded our master's robe inside out." Master Kenji watched from a distance, saying nothing, but in his aging eyes, now dim with time, a gentle light shone, like autumn sunlight. The once careless, clumsy student had now learned how to be gentle with the clumsiness of others. Not because he had forgotten discipline, but because he had absorbed its spirit. Discipline is meant to transform yourself, not to wound others. When someone has enough discipline with themselves, they no longer need to wield it as a weapon against others. When someone has walked through the shadows of ego, they will leave room for others to make mistakes, to grow, to rise. A true practitioner is not defined by how strictly they follow the rules, but by how they respond to mistakes, their own, and those of others. This gentleness is not weakness, but the result of an inner maturity that no longer needs criticism to affirm its worth. It is a discipline rooted so deeply that from it, compassion naturally grows. If today you see someone making a mistake, ask yourself, have I ever been like them? Can I be sure I will never be again? And if today you find yourself repeating an old mistake, do not make excuses. Be honest with yourself. Reflect, adjust, refine, bit by bit. But do not use a whip. Use light. True growth always walks hand in hand with gentleness, like a hand lifting a fallen flower. Not out of pity, but from faith that it can still rise if it is no longer trampled. Herb Teaching 5. Reality is never wrong. It is just that our mind has not yet seen clearly. Each of us views the world through a lens that can be cleared by mindfulness or clouded by biases, expectations, and fears. When things do not unfold the way we want, our most natural reaction is to blame others, blame life, sometimes even blame ourselves. But in Zen teachings, there is no such thing as the world's mistake, there is only unclear perception, a tangled mind, or rigid viewpoints not yet wide enough to see that everything happens in perfect accordance with its own natural law. The spiritual path does not teach us to control circumstances, but to expand our awareness, so we can recognize that every circumstance, whether pleasant or difficult, is a timely, appropriate, and precise lesson meant for our growth. Reality does not come to please us. Reality comes to return us to where we truly belong, a place beyond illusion. In a small village tucked between bamboo groves and tea hills in Shizuoka, There lived a man named Haru, a potter known across the region for his vases. Delicate as cicada wings, with glaze clear as morning dew. He lived alone, no wife, no family, no close friends, only his kiln, wooden boards, stones, and the silence that stretched from dawn till dusk. People said Haru was difficult. Anyone who came to learn from him was turned away. No matter how polite they were. They left with nothing more than a soft shake of the head, like a breeze passing through. Until one day, a young man named Kenshō, an orphan who had wandered through many villages, came asking to become his disciple. Haru did not say no, but he did not say yes either. He simply pointed to a pile of firewood behind the kiln and said, "Chop it. When it is gone, come back." Kenshō did not understand, but he obeyed. For over 2 weeks, he chopped wood, hauled water, cleaned the yard, without a single complaint. On the 17th day, Haru said, "Tomorrow, come with me into the kiln." Joy surged in Kenshō's heart like sunlight after days of steady rain. But once inside the kiln, he realized the lesson was nothing like he imagined. Haru did not teach him how to knead the clay or shape a vase. He simply made him stand for hours watching the fire burn, observe the changing color of the glaze, listen to the faint crackling of the clay, and smell the scent of burning ash. As long as you think pottery is about controlling the clay, you have learned nothing, Haru said. The clay does not need control. You need to learn to listen to it. One time, after 3 weeks of shaping his first vase, Kenshō was devastated to see it crack wide open after being removed from the kiln. He was angry. He felt betrayed. "Why? I followed every step correctly," he shouted. Haru replied with just one sentence. "The vase is not wrong. It is your mind that has not yet understood enough to see that it was not ready." The next day, Kenshō shattered the broken vase and quietly began again. He no longer tried to make something beautiful, but instead sat more quietly with the clay, listened to the temperature of the kiln, and observed every subtle shift in weather. Through each failure, he came to realize, no vase ever breaks without reason. No mistake is unfair. No misfortune is random. Every crack reflected a moment of hurry, a gap in understanding, a place where he had imposed instead of listened. Years later, when Haru passed away, the village held a memorial. They displayed his most beautiful vases and those of his students around the old kiln. Kenshō, now a renowned potter himself, brought a vase that was imperfect, not symmetrical. Its glaze cracked like tiny crow's feet. When someone asked why he did not choose a more perfect piece, he answered, "Because this vase carries the most important lesson my teacher ever gave me. Nothing was ever wrong with the clay. It was my mind that once lacked the depth to understand that even the break was a rightful part of the process." From then on, in every vase Kenshō created, people saw not just outer beauty, but felt the serenity of someone who had stopped arguing with reality. Regardless of the weather, regardless of the outcome, he no longer asked, "Why is this happening?" Instead, he simply took a deep breath and reminded himself, "I am being reminded, whether in loss, failure, or rejection, all became stepping stones on the path toward inner stillness." No more dividing the world into right and wrong, fortunate and unfortunate. Only one question remained: is my heart ready to see this as part of my evolution? If today something feels out of alignment, do not rush to blame the world. Take a step back, observe, ask yourself, what expectations am I holding on to? Am I imposing how things should be? When you release the question, why is this wrong? A new space opens, where you can see that every twist of fate is a perfectly timed shift. Every misstep is life's quiet recalibration, guiding you toward a deeper version of yourself. Not everything in life comes the way we wish, but everything comes in the way we need. The mind loves to draw a map of what should happen, an invisible blueprint for the ideal life. The ideal person, the ideal journey we believe we deserve. But life does not follow that map. Life is not wrong. Life simply does not conform to the narrow expectations of the ego. In Zen, the seeker does not try to reshape reality. They train their mind to dissolve like water, able to flow through all terrains, to slip into every crack of both pain and awakening. When you suffer, it is not because the world is unjust. It is because your mind is still clinging to something you believe you need, which may in fact be the very thing holding you back. Every unwanted circumstance, if looked at deeply enough, is an unnamed teacher, arriving right on time to help you release something outdated that you are not yet ready to let go of. During the brutal years of war in the East, there lived a monk named Ryosho, who was once a renowned scholar of philosophy at a major university. When the country fell into chaos, he left his prestigious position, shaved his head, donned a humble brown robe, and retreated to a forgotten mountaintop. His former students and colleagues, those who once admired him, believed he was running away from reality, turning his back on life. But Ryosho knew clearly, he was not escaping. He was seeking a deeper reality, one untouched by theory, power, or the hunger for recognition. Under the roof of a simple straw hut, he lived with meditation, tea, wild greens from the forest, and a silence as ancient and unmoving as the mountain itself. One spring, a young man named Takeshi came to find him. This young man had lost his entire family in the war, been stripped of all possessions and status, and bore an injury in his leg. Though still young, his eyes carried the exhaustion of someone far older, a soul not yet laid to rest. Kneeling before the old monk, Takeshi spoke through tears. "I do not understand why things turned out this way. I did nothing wrong. I lived kindly, worked hard, and yet my family died. And I survived in pain. Is life unjust, Master?" Ryosho did not answer. He simply pointed toward a rock wall, where a pine tree was growing sideways out of the stone. "Do you see that pine tree?" he asked. "Yes," Takeshi replied. "It is growing in the wrong place. It should be in flat soil, with sunlight and water, but it grew from hard stone. In the shade. Do you think it survived by luck?" Ryosho continued. Takeshi looked closely. He saw the roots gripping every small crack in the rock, the branches stretching sideways toward the light, and the sharp pine needles glistening with dew like patient fingers reaching for the sun. "Its reality is not wrong," Ryosho said. "Only the observer believes it should be somewhere else. Just like you. You think you should have had a different life, because your mind has not yet seen the meaning of the one you have. If you are still alive after all you have lost, it means your life still holds a purpose you have not yet understood. Pain does not come to punish. It comes to cut away illusions of an easy life. You are not wrong for hurting. But you will waste that pain if you keep demanding that life match the picture you drew. After that day, Takeshi stayed at the mountain hut with the old monk. He did not study philosophy, nor ask more questions. He simply lived with the sunlight, the wind, and the eerie quiet of the mountaintop. Each day spent gathering firewood, carrying water, tending the fire. He slowly began to feel alive again, the heat in his palms, the murmur of flowing water, the forest sighing as wind passed through it. What once seemed ordinary became his new teachers. He stopped searching for reasons from the past. He stopped asking why life was the way it was. He simply acknowledged, if I am still breathing, then I still have a chance to live well, in ways that pain once kept me from seeing. Years later, Takeshi came down from the mountain, but he did not return to his old city. Instead, he chose a rural village, where he taught orphans to read, tended a garden, cooked meals, and helped the poor build homes. People grew fond of him, not because he preached, but because his presence brought the quiet peace of an old tree. One person once asked, "What made you change?" He simply smiled, "Because I once thought my life was wrong, but now I understand. That very life brought me here. Right or wrong does not lie in the situation. It lies in which eyes we choose to see it with. Like the pine that grows from stone, each of us has our own cracks, imperfections, and paths no one would have chosen. But if you can see life not as right or wrong, but simply as what is, then you stop resisting, stop blaming, stop trying to rewrite the map. Instead, you begin to walk, not demanding anything, just asking, why has the current brought me here? And what within me needs to open now?" Herb Teaching 6. Silence has its own wisdom. Words are a miraculous tool, but they can also form a thin veil that obscures truth. In a world where everyone rushes to speak, where every silence is filled with explanations, debates, or judgments, a person who knows how to remain silent becomes as rare and refreshing as a cool breeze in the sweltering midday sun. Silence does not mean weakness. Silence is not surrender. In the light of Zen, silence is the bravest action of a soul that already knows it has enough. Only when language stops can truth begin to speak. Only when the mind no longer tries to intrude does wisdom emerge from a deep stillness, like a mountain lake untouched by desires. The silence Zen refers to is not avoidance, but a state of full presence, no need to prove, no need to explain, no need to occupy someone else's space. It is a form of intelligence that does not speak, but seeps into everything that cannot be said. During Japan's Heian period, there lived a venerable Zen master named Kikuin, who gathered moss on the wooden temple nestled midway up a mountain. Locals revered him like a living bodhisattva, not for his sermons, but because his quiet presence awakened awareness. He never preached to crowds, never wrote books, took few disciples. He simply rose early, swept leaves, brewed tea, meditated beneath a pine, and occasionally gazed deeply into the eyes of those seeking advice, without saying a single word. One day, a famous scholar from the capital visited the temple. Accustomed to conferences and debates, he brought with him 10 profound questions about Zen that he believed no one had truly answered. After polite greetings, he read each question aloud, each more complex, demanding deep concepts and philosophical arguments. Kikuin remained silent. When the last question ended, He simply poured a cup of tea and placed it in front of his guest, then poured himself another and lifted it. The scholar waited, expecting a grand lecture, but none came. The silence lingered, leaves rustled outside. The aroma of tea faintly filled the air. The sun edged behind the mountain ridge. The scholar grew uneasy and asked again, "Master, why do you not answer?" Kikuin smiled and pointed to the courtyard where a red leaf drifted onto damp stone. At that moment, even the proud scholar could not help but watch. His eyes followed the leaf in silence. A moment passed, then 2. Then 3. Finally, he bowed deeply and said, "I understand. All the answers are present. I spoke too much to hear them." Kikuin said nothing. He simply smiled, like water flowing through rock. No need for praise. Just slow permeation. From that day on, the scholar stopped writing so much. He spent more time in the garden, sitting quietly under the eaves, having moments without speaking yet feeling complete. In a letter to an old friend, he wrote, "I once believed truth lay in grand debates, in dazzling conclusions, but now I see it quietly rests between 2 breaths, between a falling leaf and a hot cup of tea." Silence is not the empty space between words. It is the land where the ego withdraws, allowing life to breathe truthfully. In silence, you begin to hear your own heart, not the loud voice of desire or fear, but the soft sigh of the forgotten self. In this quiet, you stop trying to impress, stop proving yourself, stop resisting reality. You start touching the depth of existence, where nothing more needs to be known, only fully lived. If today your mind is restless, the world noisy, life demanding you speak, react, prove yourself, try sitting down. Put aside all questions and judgments. Do nothing but breathe, observe, watch. When you learn to be still without impatience, when you let go of needing to know, when you accept that not everything has an explanation, truth begins to appear like a ray of light through a narrow doorway, illuminating parts of you thought had long dried. That's when wisdom no longer needs words, because you don't need reasons to live deeply. The world often mistakes intelligence for speech, for visible credentials, but in Zen's view, the deepest wisdom needs no words. The closer you get to raw truth, the more redundant talking becomes. A flower does not need description to release its fragrance. A stream does not need explanation to flow. Someone deeply immersed in inner stillness realizes, the more one speaks, the farther one drifts, the more one is silent, the closer one comes. Not every question needs answering. Not every understanding needs sharing. Some truths arise only in silence, where the ego no longer intrudes, where the mind stops analyzing, where only the pure presence of this moment remains. In a remote countryside of ancient China, an elderly Zen master lived in a thatched hut in a birch forest. People called him Silent One, not because he was mute, but because he rarely spoke. Yet every season, followers from afar crossed forests and streams to just sit beside him, not to hear teachings, but to sit in stillness beside him. Under fallen leaves, people saw an old man with hair as white as mist, sitting beside the ashes of the hearth, holding a cup of tea, eyes resting on mist drifting over the mountain slopes. Some came and left disappointed. Others stayed, and gradually recognized that this silence was not empty. It was a different language, a wordless language deeper than any scripture. Among those who came was a young general named Lu Tam, a veteran of many battles, who had experienced glory and destruction. After a great war, he renounced his military power. Feeling deep confusion within, he had been hailed a hero, commanded obedience without blinking, ordered villages turned to ashes. Yet in the silent house after his victories, he could not sleep. The enemy was gone, but a greater enemy, uncertainty, remained. He heard of the Silent One, and one day quietly sought him out. When he arrived, he knelt before the old master and said sincerely, "Please teach me how to calm my mind. I have seen triumph and ruin, yet still find no rest." The Silent One said nothing. He gestured for the young general to sit, then brewed tea. The two sat facing each other in silence. One cup was poured. A wisp of smoke rose. Birds chirped far away. Wind brushed the bamboo. A small crackle from burning wood. Nothing was spoken. 1 hour passed. Lu Tam felt restless. The second hour, he grew uneasy. In the third hour, a tear rolled down his cheek, not from sorrow, not from emotion, only because he had never sat so long in silence without any role to play. At that moment, he looked at the master, unmoving like stone, yet gentle like sunlight. He bowed deeply and whispered, "I understand now. There's nothing to fix. Just observe. Just sit quietly with yourself." He stayed in the hut for 3 years. He did not study philosophy, did not recite sutras. He only learned how to sweep leaves slowly, how to sip tea as though it were his last cup, how to hear the sound of his own footsteps while staying rooted in place. When he left, he carried nothing but a simple bamboo staff. Back in his homeland, he built a small hut beside a stream and welcomed suffering seekers. People called him the silent listener because he received them with his eyes, with his deep presence, never interrupting. Yet each visitor departed lighter, clearer, brighter. Silence has its own wisdom because it neither reacts, nor interrupts, nor judges. In that space, another can hear themselves. The suffering can know their own pain. The seeker can find the answer without books. Zen needs no additions. It only needs subtraction. Less talk, fewer reasons, less effort to fix. When words cease, the heart begins to speak, not in sound, but in clarity, in release, in awakening. If you are passing through a foggy chapter, try asking nothing. Sit quietly with your breath. Let the silence remind you that not every wound needs dissection. Some pain only needs to be witnessed in stillness. When you learn the art of not interrupting the natural flow of life, when you stop needing to always know, always be right, always understand, then true wisdom can rise from its deepest source. Herb Teaching 7. There is no one to forgive, only the ego to let go. People often think forgiveness means granting pardon to someone else, forgiving the betrayer, the one who hurt, who abandoned. But in the light of Zen, forgiveness is not really for them. Forgiveness is an act of liberation for yourself, freeing the wounded ego. As long as you believe someone must apologize or be held accountable, your heart remains bound by an unfinished judgment. Every memory reopens a wound. The ego enjoys playing the victim, not because it hurts, but because in pain it feels important. The truth is, no one truly needs forgiveness. If you look deeply, every action, even cruel or violent, stems from ignorance, From a confusion the other person does not fully understand themselves. When you see this, you don't feel elevated above the one who hurt you. You see two lost souls wandering in the same dream. Letting go then comes not from mercy, but from wisdom. The wisdom that holding onto anger only ties you to your own chains. In a rural riverside village in the Kansai region lived a quiet farmer named Daisuke, tending a small garden year-round. 10 years earlier, he had been a wealthy merchant, a big house, a beautiful wife, friends far and wide, but after a trusted friend betrayed him in a fraudulent investment, he lost everything. His wife left without a word under neighbors' whispers. Daisuke survived the shock like a tree stripped bare, roots exposed. Future dim. Each dawn he rose, tended his vegetables, cooked simple meals, slept early, never spoke of the past. When asked, he remained silent. One autumn day of rare warmth, a stranger arrived, humble clothes, weary eyes. He sought shelter in Daisuke's old hut. No one knew at first. It was the very friend who had ruined him. When they recognized each other, the friend bowed, voice trembling. "I have nothing left but to say sorry. If you want to drive me out, I will accept it." Daisuke looked at him a long while, then gestured toward a patch of old cabbages by the fence. "There's some space. You can plant a few rows. That soil over there needs turning. No blame, no mention of the past. Just a silent invitation, as if the old story never existed." Day after day, the two men lived side by side, gardening, cooking, drinking tea in silence. The friend carried remorse, Daisuke carried none. At winter's end, the man asked, "Why do you not hate me? Why no punishment?" Daisuke gazed at the misty sky and softly replied, "I once carried that flame of anger for many years. It did not burn you, it burned me. One day I saw clearly. It was not you who imprisoned me, but me holding onto your shadow to remain the victim. I did not forgive you. I simply released the story that trapped me. No one can truly hurt you unless you let that memory live in your mind every day. Each time you recount an old wound, you water the seed of suffering growing within. Liberation doesn't come from someone's apology. It comes when you see that tightly holding onto pain doesn't harm the other, it only tires your own hands. Forgiveness is not a gift to them. It is a gift to yourself, so you can move forward unbound by outdated narratives. If you still carry someone in your heart, someone who hurt, abandoned, judged, betrayed, sit quietly in stillness. Don't force forgiveness. Don't defend them or seek justification. Simply breathe. Notice the tightness in your chest. Ask, what am I clinging to? Do I really need to carry this suffering to protect my ego? When you get brutally honest, the answer comes, not as words, but as an indefinable lightness. That's when you realize, there is no one left to forgive. There is only the ego to release, so you can live free. Alive again, unburdened by a story that no longer serves you. In everyday life, forgiveness is often seen as a noble gift, the injured granting healing to another. But this view still speaks of the ego, a self that wants to feel moral, magnanimous, higher, deserving of apology. In Zen, once the boundary between me and others dissolves, forgiveness becomes moot. Who is left to forgive when you once were also lost in ignorance? Who to blame when suffering springs from collective confusion? Letting go is not an act toward another, it is a return inward. To examine what still imprisons you, stories you repeat, roles you replay, wounds you relive. A Zen parable tells of a teacher named Aika who lived in a small temple at the forest edge. One spring morning, when peach blossoms bloomed and birds sang through mist, a stranger arrived and asked to speak privately. He did not give his name. With deep bow, he said, "Master, 15 years ago I broke into this house. I stole food and even a small Buddha statue. I have regretted it ever since. I lived in shame, unable to face myself. I am here only to ask for forgiveness." Aika remained silent for a while, watching the man, older now, eyes crinkled by regret. Then he said, "Do you know the pine tree outside in the courtyard?" The man nodded. 15 years ago I planted it using a broken branch from a great storm. Each morning I watered it but never forced it to grow. Now look at it. Does it blame the wind that broke its branch so long ago?" The man stayed silent. Aika continued, "The Buddha statue you took, that is not what matters. The real gift in this house is the ability to turn around. And you came here today to use it. As for me, I did not resent you even before you realized your mistake. There is nothing left in me to forgive." The man cried. For the first time in 15 years, he did not feel like a wrongdoer, but simply someone who once misunderstood. He stayed at the temple 7 more years, not atoning, but living simply, chopping wood, cooking, teaching children. People felt at ease around him, because his presence no longer required proof or apology or hiding. When he passed away, beneath the pine tree a small stone was etched by Aika's hand. There is no one to forgive, only one who has learned to understand. This story continues to be told in Zen monasteries as a lesson in letting go from the root. To no longer need forgiveness. You must have the courage to look within at your own resentment and realize it is not virtue, but the ego craving significance. The ego likes being hurt, because it feels alive when it can still hate someone. But when you stop telling that story daily, when you stop labeling yourself the hurt one, the pain loses its reason to stay. Letting go is not forgetting, it is no longer identifying yourself by your past. If you still carry someone in your heart who once hurt you, try sitting in silence, not visualizing them, not reliving the events. Let your breath carry you inward, deep into a stillness beyond past and blame. After enough time there, you will acknowledge the other no longer matters. What matters is whether you still choose to hold onto resistance as part of your identity. Once you release that, forgiveness becomes unnecessary, because you're not bound anymore. Herb Teaching 8. Everyone is a teacher, especially those who irritate you. The world often labels the pleasant as friends and the unpleasant as enemies. But in Zen, those who disturb your peace are often the most silent masters, the clearest mirrors reflecting what you have not yet understood in yourself. Someone who irritates you does not plant irritation in you. They simply awaken it, like gently tapping a cracked glass. The reaction does not lie in them, but in you. Whenever someone offends, betrays, or hurts you, if you are mindful, you can see not only their action, but also the expectations, the attachments, the wounds still simmering inside you. When you see that, you begin to learn, not to craft sharper responses, but to understand why your heart still feels so small. The true teacher is not always gentle. Sometimes they arrive in the form of the person who annoys you most, just to teach you a lesson about yourself. Once, during the Ming Dynasty, a famous Zen master shared his story from his youth as a monk named Shenru. When he first entered the monastery, Shenru was diligent, intelligent, and admired by his peers. But he had one weakness: he would easily become angry if criticized, especially by someone he did not respect. In the monastery lived a novice named Fei, clumsy, careless, blunt-spoken, often spilling tea, dirtying the courtyard, even once nearly setting the meditation hall ablaze. Shenru hated sloppiness. Every time Fei made a mistake, Shenru frowned, shook his head, sometimes scolded him sharply. Fei never reacted. He only bowed his head or smiled faintly and then repeated the mistake again. One day, after Fei spilled a pot of porridge and forced the monks to have a sparse lunch of boiled vegetables, Shenru snapped in rage, skipped his own meal, and went to the abbot. He said bitterly, "I have studied here many years, kept strict discipline, exerted endless effort, yet every day I am forced to live with a careless, foolish, unambitious person. I feel insulted just by his presence." The abbot simply smiled and said, "Good, then stay with him for another year." Shenru was stunned. "But I can leave. I can go study at another monastery." The abbot remained calm. "You may go. But if you leave because you cannot tolerate one person, then no matter how many monasteries you visit, you will encounter him again, maybe not as Fei, but under another form, reflecting what you have not yet overcome." Those words struck deep into Shenru's pride. That night he sat long under the temple eaves, gazing at the flickering lamp, recalling each time he had become angry, feeling justified, yet afterward sensing a persistent emptiness in his chest as though something inside remained unhealed. He remembered Fei's resigned gaze and silent footsteps after every rebuke. A quiet question arose: who is learning here, him or me? From the next day, Shenru shifted. Each time Fei made a mistake, he no longer reacted sharply. Instead, he observed the rising emotion in himself, watching it as a detached observer. Then inhaled deeply. Sometimes he even gently taught Fei how to do things properly, not from a position of superiority, but with the patience of someone healing themselves through compassionate acts. After 6 months, he realized he no longer found Fei irritating. What once angered him now made him smile, not because Fei changed, but because he had stopped resisting imperfection. Years later, as a respected master, Shenru often recounted the story to his disciples. He would say, "The person who helps you evolve is not only the kind teacher, but also the one who forces you to face the unhealed wounds within yourself. They do not need to teach, their presence is the lesson." Take a look at your current life. Who irritates you the most? Who can you not forgive, not empathize with, not endure? That person may be the greatest teacher in your life, if you are ready to learn. Do not wait for them to change. Instead, see your irritation as the beginning of your own self-inquiry. Each time anger arises, ask, "What am I protecting in my ego?" Each time you feel reactive, step back and observe, "If I carried no past history, would this person still seem blameworthy?" The person who angers you holds no real authority over your mind. They simply reveal what you have yet to see within: a sufficient, clear heart will feel gratitude even toward someone who once hurt you, because they opened the door to deeper liberation. Herb Teaching 9. Peace does not come from controlling life, but from knowing yourself. People often dream of a stable, safe life without surprises or suffering, as if peace can only be achieved when everything outside aligns with our wishes. We plan, set goals, hedge risks, and try to shape circumstances to stay within our comfort zone. Yet life seldom follows our script. People change, jobs vanish, bodies grow sick, times shift. No matter how skillful you are, life's waves are inevitable. If your peace depends on no waves, you will forever chase the impossible. Zen does not teach you to control the world. It teaches you to understand yourself, so when the world shifts, you remain yourself. When you truly know your mind, you do not fear upheaval, because you no longer need it to define who you are. True peace is the ability to stand amid chaos without being shaken, to sit through the storm without being swept away. Once, a venerable Zen master named Hagen lived along the southern coast of Kyoto. His modest retreat sat on the edge of a cliff, where each morning sunlight poured through the window, and each night the waves whispered like an ocean's sad lullaby. Many considered the place too dangerous. Storms could wash everything away at any moment. Yet Hagen stayed, day after day, quietly steadfast like the rock beneath his home. Villagers came to him with questions about suffering or letting go. He seldom answered directly. Instead, he invited them simply to listen to the waves. One afternoon, a wealthy merchant came, having just suffered a great financial collapse, lost everything he had: wealth, reputation, friends. With tired eyes he asked, "Master, I once had everything. I always controlled my life well. Now I have nothing. How do I find peace again?" Hagen led him to the cliff's edge where waves battered the shore. "Do you see the sea now?" he asked. "Yes." "And the rock beneath our feet?" "Yes." "And does this rock worry about the waves?" The merchant fell silent. Hagen picked up a pebble and dropped it into the sea. "If you are the waves, you will always tire fighting everything. If you are the rock, you learn to let waves pass without losing yourself." That night the merchant stayed at the temple. He sat alone on the porch, listening to wind across the thatched roof, leaves falling, his heart no longer stirred by inner turmoil. The next morning in the mist he told Hagen, "Now I understand. I was wrong to think peace is about controlling everything. True peace is when you don't need control, yet remain unshaken." He returned to his village, opened a simple tea house, and lived humbly. People say that regardless of storms or poor harvests, he always smiled. When asked why, he replied, "Because I sat by the waves and was not swept away." Whenever you feel fear rising inside, pause and ask, "What am I trying to control? Is this even within my ability?" When you answer honestly, you begin to see that most anxiety comes from clinging to what cannot be held. No one can guarantee what tomorrow brings, but you can choose to be fully present today, without controlling, without resisting, just breathing and observing. In that observation, a miracle occurs. The more you understand yourself, the less need you have to change the world. Peace is not found in what you possess, but in how you are present with what already exists. Throughout life, we are taught that happiness requires control of time, work, relationships, and future. We believe that if we keep a firm grip on every variable, life cannot hurt us. But the harder we try, the more susceptible we become, because life never pledges to follow our safe map. Sudden events, illness, betrayal, loss, are not aberrations. They are life's natural rhythms. Reality does not heed our safety blueprint. It unfolds in its own way, sometimes fierce, sometimes gentle, always beyond our grasp. True peace does not emerge from reshaping the world to match our desires. It arises when you realize, if I understand myself, I don't need the world to change for me to feel secure. A young woman named Mizuki once sought out Zen master Daisen on Mount Koya after losing both parents in an earthquake. In less than a week, her world crumbled, home destroyed, family lost, future erased. She entered the meditation hall with dry eyes, grief so overwhelming she could no longer cry. She asked Daisen, "Master, I lived well. I was good, hardworking, never wrong. Why did everything fall apart so swiftly? Why was I taken from everything? How can I find peace when there is nothing left to hold on to?" Daisen did not answer immediately. He invited Mizuki to the garden behind the temple, where a small pond mirrored the clear autumn sky. A single dry leaf floated on the surface, directionless, aimless. He pointed to the leaf and said, "Do you see it? It seems powerless, drifting with the current, attached to nothing. But do you see it sinking?" Mizuki shook her head. Daisen continued, "Because it does not resist the flow. It cannot be dragged under. If it clung to the old branch or the pond's edge, it would have been pulled down. But because it lets go, it stays afloat." Then he turned to her and said, "You have nothing left to cling to. So you are like that leaf. You do not need to fix your direction. Simply stay afloat, and that is your first peace." Mizuki remained at the monastery for 3 months, not to recover what was lost, but to learn how to live with herself in an uncertain world. At first, each meditation session felt tortuous. Her mind screamed. Memories of her parents swirled. Panic tightened her chest. Yet gradually, the silence of the mountain, the soft morning bell, and the steady slow breath in the meditation hall taught her how to stay with pain without pushing or resisting. She came to see loss not as an enemy but as a silent companion reminding her of one truth: nothing lasts, not even despair. On the day she left, she bowed deeply to Zen Master Daisen. He said only, "If one day everything collapses again, remember to look into your mind first, not the world. Peace does not lie outside." After that, Mizuki stopped trying to make life return to what it was. She began to live more simply, more honestly with her emotions. She no longer feared change, because she understood that if her mind is steady, external winds are only winds, they do not disturb her inner calm. You may be living amid uncertainty, trying to control a crumbling relationship, holding onto a job that no longer brings joy, afraid of a future that seems unclear. But ask yourself, what am I trying to control to avoid what inside myself? Maybe what you need is not a plan, but a moment of stillness to observe yourself. When you understand the root of your fear, worry has no reason to stay. When you accept life's impermanence, you no longer need to hold on to feel safe. Peace then is not something life hands you, but the fruit of a mind that stops resisting truth. There is a strange paradox: you only feel when lived. The more you try to control life, the more you lose peace. Yet when you let go of control, Peace quietly arrives, like evening shadows falling softly on the ground. Many live in perpetual tension, not because their life is in chaos, but because their mind is torn between the uncontrollable and the fear of being swept away. They strain each day to make things right, perfect, according to plan, and when life deviates, they break. But the issue is not the event itself, it's not knowing how to remain steady amid that event. Self-knowledge does not come from books. It arises in moments when nothing can be controlled anymore, when plans fail, roles no longer fit, and you face yourself raw and powerless. In that moment, if you don't turn away but look deeply inside, you start to see something different, a still point not shaken by circumstances. One ancient monastery in Izumo was home to a Zen master named Genshin, not famous for grand sermons, but for living simply and silently like the earth. Villagers saw him every morning by a stream, gazing into the water without words, listening to a silent sermon. Once, a man who lost everything in a flood came with grief heavy upon him. He had been a prosperous farmer with plentiful fields and a structured family. But in one night, the water came and swept away everything, including his wife and youngest child. He stood before Genshin, face frozen like stone, but inside he roared in silent agony. He asked, "What must I do to regain my old life? I cannot bear that everything vanished in a moment." Genshin said nothing. He invited the man to sit in meditation by the stream. They sat all morning in silence. The sun rose and disappeared behind the hills. As the final light sank, Genshin turned and pointed to the flowing water. "Do you see the stream? The stream does not cling to its shape from yesterday. It just flows. It does not cry for a bend lost, nor pine for a straight path. People suffer because they want to hold onto water in their hands." Then he bent down, scooped water in his hand. It slipped through his fingers and flowed onward. Life is like that too. The more you grip, the more you lose. Only when you let go can you be free. The man said nothing, but the next morning he returned. Without asking anything, just sat. A week later, he asked to stay at the monastery, not for answers, but to learn how to stop seeking. 5 years passed. He became a different person, not because pain was gone, but because he no longer struggled inside it. When people asked about the tragedy, he just smiled. "I thought I lost everything. Now I see, I only lost what could not stay. What remains is who I truly am." Freedom is not having control over everything. Freedom is knowing when to let go. Life does not need you to redraw the map of the river. It only asks that you learn to swim in the flow of your own mind. When you truly understand what makes you react, what scares you, what you cling to feel worthy, you no longer need to control every situation to feel safe. Real peace does not come from no waves. It comes from becoming the rock beneath the river, steady, flexible, not rigid, not resisting, only fully present in each moment, knowing everything will eventually flow onward. Herb Teaching 10. Everything is temporary, so there is no need to cling. If there is one truth that every spiritual tradition, every life's philosophy, every profound Zen teaching points toward, it is this: nothing is permanent. Everything, from joy to sorrow, from success to failure, from the friend you love to even your own self, is only a temporary guest passing through this inn we call life. Clinging is unnatural, because it goes against the ceaseless flow of all phenomena. The more we try to hold onto something, the more fear arises, because deep down we know everything will eventually change. Letting go is not indifference. It is accepting that life is a river, and no branch can anchor itself forever. When you truly understand impermanence, you stop resisting the passage of time. You learn to smile as you say your farewell to what once was yours. Like folding your hands in gratitude as the sun dips behind the mountain, without demanding that it linger another second. An ancient Zen story from China speaks of Master Wuji, who lived in solitude in a small hut atop Mount Daming. He accepted no students, offered no Dharma talks. He simply lived with his tea garden and long meditation sessions under an old pine tree. Every late autumn, he would descend to a small village by a stream to buy seeds, salt, writing paper, and exchange a few words with the locals in an old tea house. People called him the Old Man of Autumn Wind, because only when the fallen leaves carpeted the courtyard would they see his figure emerge through the mist, his brown robe worn, his eyes serene as though unaffected by 100 seasons. One year, a young widow in grief came to Wuji in despair. Her husband had just died in a forest accident, leaving her alone with a toddler. She cried endlessly, as if the world had collapsed on her shoulders. When she met the Zen master, she asked, "You taught that everything is temporary. But why can the temporary bring such pain? If everything will pass away, then what is there to live for?" Wuji did not respond. He poured her a cup of hot tea and gently placed a golden leaf, fallen from the eaves, in her open palm. "Do you see this leaf?" he said. "It was once green, basking in sunlight, swaying on a tall branch. Then one day it fell, not because anything was wrong with it, and not because anyone rejected it. It fell because autumn arrived." She remained silent, tears still flowing. Wuji continued, "Your husband lived beside you like that green leaf. Now he has fallen, not because he did something wrong, but because his season has closed. You do not need to cling to what has fallen. Learn to treasure the leaf that has fallen as an irreplaceable memory. Then let it return to the earth. If you hold it forever in your hand, it will dry and crumble. But if you release it to the ground, it becomes nourishment for new life." The young woman stayed at Wuji's retreat for 1 week, not to learn Zen, but to learn how to live with grief without being consumed by it. Each dawn she lit the fire, brewed tea, polished the wooden floor, listened to the wind whispering through the pines. One morning, watching a dewdrop vanish in the first light of day, she felt a lightness in her heart, not because pain had disappeared, but because she no longer needed to grasp it to prove that love once existed. Understanding impermanence taught her gratitude even for loss, because it had shown her what it means to be fully present in that moment. Zen does not demand that you abandon life or love. It merely reminds you that you do not need to hold them as though they belong to you forever. Nothing is truly ours. People come, then they go. Happiness arrives, then fades. Grief too is temporary. Because of impermanence, everything becomes sacred. Because nothing lasts, every moment becomes worth living. If you deeply know this, you will stop asking, "How do I hold onto it?" You will instead ask, "How do I fully be present while it is here?" Even when you know impermanence intellectually, many still live as if something will last forever. You love someone and wish they would stay. You achieve success and fear it slipping away. You savor happiness and hope it remains. Yet the attachment to prolong what is beautiful is the root of suffering. When reality inevitably changes, as it always does, our mind resists and begins to collapse. The issue is not the event itself. The issue is that we never learned how to be steady within the event. Real wisdom does not arise from books, but from moments when everything falls away, when plans falter, roles no longer fit, and you meet yourself raw and vulnerable. In that moment, if you turn toward the pain instead of away, you may discover a still point inside you, a calm that time cannot disturb. There is a story about Ryokan, a Japanese Zen monk who lived in a simple straw hut high in snowy mountains. He owned nothing but a begging bowl, a bamboo flute, and a worn robe. Despite the poverty, he always smiled gently, as if listening to a beautiful song. Nothing left to grasp or defend. One night, a thief snuck into his hut. But Ryokan had nothing to steal. The thief rummaged, then turned to leave as Ryokan returned from chanting in the forest. Seeing the trembling intruder, Ryokan did not become angry. He looked at him and said, "You came all the way here in the cold night. Yet I have nothing to give. Take this robe, your body will grow cold." He took off his outer robe and placed it on the thief's shoulders. The thief looked stunned, bowed his head, and disappeared into the darkness. After the thief left, Ryokan sat alone in his small hut under the full moon rising above the mountain ridge. He murmured softly, "If only I could give him this entire moon." It was not a whimsical joke nor the eccentricity of a man with nothing. Rather, it revealed the purest expression of a heart that had let go of everything it could possibly grasp. Most people would mourn for their possessions, be angry, feel offended, but Ryokan held nothing, not wealth, not reputation, not emotion, not identity. His mind was like an empty mirror, reflecting everything then letting it pass. That is why he remained free, peaceful, joyful, not because he had much, but because he needed to hold on to nothing at all. In the end, life is just a brief visit. Your loved ones, though walking beside you for years, are only sharing part of the journey. One day they will turn a corner. Your body, no matter how tenderly cared for, will weaken and quietly complete its course. Even the emotions that dwell within you, sadness, joy, regret, hope, are like clouds drifting across the sky of your consciousness. Nothing stays forever, but because of that, everything becomes precious. When you truly understand the impermanence of all things, you begin to live as though today might be the last day you see someone you love. The last time you touch light. The last breath in this body. You no longer postpone what needs to be said. You no longer neglect the present moment. You love without needing possession. You part without regret. You live without guarantees. This kind of life doesn't grow longer, it grows deeper. It may not be louder, but it is truer. Each teaching you've heard is not some lofty philosophy or mystic arcana. They're simple seeds waiting to be gently planted in the soil of your heart. You may not feel them fully yet. Perhaps some of these words passed over you like a breeze. But do not worry. Seeds do not require immediate understanding, they only require an open, listening heart. Sooner or later, on a quiet morning or in a sleepless night, they will sprout, right in their time. Now, soften your voice within. Picture a wide, still lake. It mirrors the world like a glass. On its shore, A venerable pine tree stretches upward, its branches gently stirred by a light breeze. There is nothing urgent, nothing left to accomplish. The day's burdens have been carried away by the wind. Worries now echo only faintly in distance. Nearby, the scent of incense drifts gently, warm as a comforting embrace. A distant temple bell chimes, not to summon you away from anything, but to remind you to return to yourself. If your mind still ripples, let your breath slow. Inhale gently, like wind brushing over leaves. Exhale like dew dissolving in early mountain light. No need to chase thoughts away, simply release your hold. Become the silent witness. Let your body soften, shoulders relax, neck uncoil, face unfold like a lotus blooming under moonlight. Even amid storms outside, your mind can remain a calm sky. Peace has never existed anywhere but within this breath. This moment, this drifting towards sleep. Allow yourself to drift like a fallen leaf in its season, without regret, without grasping. If what you've just heard has lifted your heart even a little, share this video with someone who may need a moment of stillness. And if you wish to continue on these gentle, peaceful nights, please subscribe to the channel. Wishing you a tranquil sleep like a wind-calm lake. Peaceful heart, soft night, soul as light as clouds.